Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 578 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme is the little things. Our quote of the day comes to us from John Wooden. It's the little details that are vital. Little things make big things happen. If you're looking for a quick, impactful read that dives deep into mental performance, I'd love for you to check out my latest book, Process Before Results. It's set in the world of lacrosse, but the takeaways and lessons apply not only to any sport, but any area of life. You can grab your copy by heading on over to Amazon, and I really and truly appreciate your support. I enjoyed my conversation with today's guest, Jason Gibson, and I know you will too. From mentorship to goals, habits, behaviors, and lifestyle. We cover a lot of ground, and there's real value in what Jason shares. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Jason, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, man, I'm happy to be here, Chris. Thanks so much for inviting me, man.
Appreciate it. First question we ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Absolutely. Always. I wake up with that intention on my mind every single day. How can I make myself one? And how can I make somebody else better through something I do or say?
You know, people talk often about, it's only one person, but you do one person every day. You do that for a week, for a month. You do it for a couple months, and obviously it compounds. So I know that we're going to have a fun conversation here today. And the whole premise behind our show, No Quit Living podcast, is to motivate and inspire our listeners. And I was curious if you either have a personal or professional story where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Oh, man, how many? How many? But I think the one that first comes to mind is graduate school when I was getting my master's degree. I actually did give up and came back to it like some years later. But that was just kind of one of those moments in my life where in my early 20s, just trying to figure it out, not only my trajectory in life, but trying to figure out myself. And I did. I actually finished my coursework for graduate school and didn't come back to the thesis portion of it, meaning I didn't finish the degree. And basically what happened was probably about 3 years after I dropped out, I got into entrepreneurship, and I was doing that over the course of that 3 years. But I just really felt the strong unction to finish what I started. And that was one of those things that I absolutely did not want to, but I felt the strong unction to do so. And it wasn't until I finished the degree that I saw how integral that completion was to all of the next things that I would be doing. I think that would be one of the instances that I actually gave up but recovered. I don't think the fumble doesn't matter as long as there's a recovery.
I love that analogy, and I know some coaches, Bill Belichick, would disagree 100% because his idea is never lose the ball. But I have to ask a follow-up question, and I'm asking it both selfishly but also maybe for the listeners that maybe they're in a part of their life, or maybe there's something that they have not completed, whether it's career-wise, whether it's school, whether it's a different level. Was there something or somebody that helped you along the way, or was it more just it was a time and place in life where you said, I feel this calling to finish it?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Great question. I've always been fortunate enough to have some very powerful and influential voices in my life. Namely my parents, my mom and dad. Those have always been confidants. But even further than that, I've always prioritized having mentors, people who've been where I want to go, who've seen what I want to see. So with that in mind, I've always had, people who have been integral to speaking into my life, whereas I can avoid some of the hurdles that they went through. So yeah, I've had quite a few mentors and wise counsel as I've kind of like navigated my journey.
Have you sought some of those out, or have they been there, and maybe some that were brought to you, or maybe a mix between you finding them and them finding you?
Yeah, man, that's a great question as well because I was facilitating a workshop about mentorship, and I just talked about how I've never actively pursued a mentor. It was always something that kind of like just naturally and organically happened, and I found myself in spaces where there was just this natural kindred connection between myself and these individuals. My very first mentor was my 12th grade government economics teacher by the name of Dr. Willis Smith. And he was my first mentor before I even really knew what a mentor was. 12th grade, I'm about to go to college. I get this basketball scholarship. I have no clue what I'm majoring in. And just put it in context, I'm in 12th grade, so I'm 18 years old. And Dr. Smith graduated college at 20. So he was 21 years old teaching 18-year-olds. So there was this natural, we're just connected. You understand us, this relatability. And he was the one who told me, he said, man, go and major in social studies, social sciences. And I was like, man, I don't like history like that. And he was like, man, just do it. Like, it'll be fine. And I actually majored in that. And he just kind of like guided me through those first 2 years of college and beyond. So that was the first one. And I've got a few more that just kind of similarly just naturally happened.
I love that. And I could give you obviously a bunch of examples myself, but I also think for someone listening, I think there are people, and maybe you'll agree with this, that talk about, I don't have anybody, or I didn't have, a parent in my life, or I didn't have an uncle or somebody. And I don't want to take away from people in their situations, but my follow-up or challenge or encouragement to everybody is there is a way to find a mentor. And I've talked about this a lot in the podcast, and I'm curious to get your 2 cents on this idea. Is in today's day and age with technology where it is, if we went back in time 25, 30 years ago, there were not any social media. There were not seminars and workshops to the extent virtually that there are now. Some of them are free. There was no YouTube channels, no podcast. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying that for those people that might not have a mentor in their direct family or their friend close-knit circle, with technology where it is today, there is zero excuse where you can go out and find somebody or multiple people in that area or field you're looking to go into. And I want to also just note that there are so many of those mentors that offer free courses, free podcasts, free audiobooks, and you can always take advantage. And now it doesn't mean you can get free courses from anybody and everybody, but if there's an area that you're looking into, you can get it. So I'd love for you to chime in on that as well.
No, man, I agree with you 100%. Just because of what with technology looking the way it looks now, and I mean, even if we just qualify the word mentorship is nothing more, nothing less than guidance in a particular direction through a particular season of life. Like, so when you think about it as like through the auspices of like this guidance principle, like you can plug into so many different outlets, so many different sources, so many different networks that can give you guidance toward a specific goal. I'm right there with you in that regard. Like, there's no excuse these days. If you want to be anything from a professional athlete to a plumber, anything from a professor to a doctor, like you can find an avenue or find an outlet that specifically hones in on the things that are necessary for you to meet that goal. So yeah, 100%, man. I think it's all about the level of intention that you apply to that.
I love that. And I was talking to one of my clients, God, this is a few months back now, and we were talking just about this subject, and he was looking to take a further step in his field. And we just came across the idea of what we just talked about, but we took it a step further, and he was saying that he had also found a bunch of old videos and YouTube videos and live presentations of a couple people that have since passed quite a few years ago. And he was just saying that, 30 years ago, the only way to get anything from somebody who was passed was either a VHS recording or their book. But now with YouTube and all these other courses and even live conferences and seminars, there's that free content, but also, if there's somebody that you wanted to study from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it's almost like unlimited. And I want to get your opinion on this also is you talked about intention. And I try to talk with clients and student athletes that there's too much is too much, meaning you can't watch every video, you can't subscribe to every podcast and read every audiobook and real book and still perform at your level. So there comes a time where you have to be really intentional with, okay, I'd love to be an expert and read, all 100 of these books, but I'm going to start with this one and that one. So please touch on that, and also in being intentional.
Yeah, man. Look, intentions, and I think you'll frequently hear this out of me because I am professor at Alcorn State University. So the heart of who I am is a teacher. So I really like to qualify, define. When I think about the word intention, I think about the hopes, the aspirations, the goals, the desires that I implore to meet a certain goal. I'm looking here right now. This is my gallon jug of water. I got to be honest, Chris. I fill up this gallon jug every single day. I might finish the whole gallon once every 2 weeks. Like, it's hard for me to finish a whole gallon of water. I'm just not as thirsty. I drink the bulk of it, like when I'm working out, but like throughout the day, just to like drink. Like, but the intention is literally filling it up every day with the expectation that I'm going to meet the goal. Now, of course, there has to be some behaviors that follow that intention that I have to implore to meet the goal. Like, so I think that's what intention looks like. Like, what are the actions that you are, or what are the goals, the aspirations that you are mentally like imploring every single day to give yourself this proverbial expectation that I will meet. Now, we get into the behaviors associated with that intention, but that's another conversation. So yeah, I think that's what intention looks like. Like, what is it that you are aspiring to do every day, and how are you preparing yourself every day to get it done?
I like that last part. Is every day, and that to me, and I always talk about this, is people assume when you say every day or all the time that it's perfection or nothing, and we can all live in a world where we chase perfection, and that's fine. But I think social media has changed the lens a little bit, where everyone's posting their highlight reel, and it's like, okay, well, if Jason did this perfectly, then he does it perfectly all the time. And the realization is, you're like, no, like, it doesn't have to be all the time. Ideally, it's more often than not, but it's not perfection or zero. I think we miss that a lot, and would love to get your opinion on the idea of going after consistency as opposed to perfection.
Yeah, man. Look, consistency is probably the ultimate, for lack of better terms, destructor of potential. Like, I think if people would just practice consistency and, like you said, not perfection, like, they would, be immeasurably better than they were the day before. Perfection, like you said, man, this whole conversation, this is such a loaded question, but I'm thinking about it even from the example that we initially talked about. And this is something that I preach to because one of the hats I wear is I'm Jackson State University's football team's player development coach, their team chaplain. So I have these type of sessions with them daily. And I tell them all the time, man, but we are 100% in control of the effort, but we have 0% control of the outcome. Like, so the effort that you put forth literally is going to be the thing that mostly influences the outcome, but you don't understand that, or you don't get that, because the effort is the thing that you just have the power to control every single day. So I try to implore them all the time, man, let's not even think about the championship now. Let's think about putting forth the effort to do just a little bit more in practice today than you did yesterday. So whereas you probably gave up on the 16th, 110, let's get to 17 today. Even though we got 26 of them to run, let's get to 18 today. And you only gave your max effort on 10 of them. Let's try to get max effort on that 11 one today. So, man, I don't think consistency is just key. I think it's essential. Like, I think it is the thing that is going to inform who we're becoming the most.
I love that. So I want to change lanes here for a second, because you brought up something that, and we obviously play in similar roles with what we do, something that I've been tinkering with. And you know that when you put something out there, it's like the reticular activation system, where all of a sudden, you just bought a new red car, and then, the next 2 days you're like, red car, you're like, what is going on here? So I've been talking about input goals versus output goals. And I've heard it so many times, different little spins, maybe different little verbiage, but it goes hand in hand. What you said is you said that we are 100% in control of the effort, not the outcome. But when we focus on the outcome championship, it's either that or nothing. And what I say with my teams as I'm working with them is yes, that championship is the goal, whether that's a conference championship, a league championship, making it to conference tournament, NCAA tournament, whatever their goal is. But then I say, okay, we reverse engineer into those inputs, and I take it a step further and say, what are those habits and actions that we need to do today? And then when we look at practice, it's over. We say, okay, did we act as a champion today? And so, what do you mean? Did we play like a champion? Did we have championship effort, championship attitude, right? Those are things we have 100% control over. But going back to my entree into it, that whole input goals versus output goals has just been hitting me like left and right, because it's focusing, not removing that end result goal. You still need to have it, right? It's like if you get in a car and you don't put the navigation in, you're just going to drive around. Now, maybe you'll get lucky and get to go where you're supposed to go. But the reality is you then need to say, okay, before you can get to your destination, you have to take the correct left. And then you have to take the correct right and drive for 2 miles on the highway as opposed to 1 or 5, because it will take you in completely different directions. I know we went a little bit along around there, but give me your 2 cents if you could, just on really and truly the work that you do working with players and teams about focusing on those inputs each and every day and not just focusing on those results.
Yeah, man. Always communicating to them the importance of SMART goals. Also, I always try to implore the team to actively and consistently employ behaviors that take you from a tendency to a lifestyle. So I tell them all the time, and this quote is in my book, I think ultimately our goal should be to make our habits a lifestyle. And what I mean by that is I can habitually go to the gym, but ultimately I want like the gym to be my lifestyle. So I tell them all the time, tendencies repeat to become habits, habits compound to become a behavior, and the behavior multiplied becomes a lifestyle. So that's literally what I'm trying to get them to understand. I know now you may just tend to show up on time, but let's continue to stroke that tendency where it becomes a habit. Now that we have a habit, let's graduate it to a behavior. And ultimately, time management has become so much of who you are that it becomes a lifestyle. So, yeah, man, like you said, that's kind of the things that I communicate to them. Like, what are we doing today? First, when it comes to those SMART goals, let's take a healthy assessment of who we've been, the type of habits that we've had up to this point. And let's assess the goal. Okay, this is the goal, but also understanding that it is going to be you consistently and habitually doing those things to get it from that tendency to a lifestyle. And like, dude, I just went all the way around the world too, but I'm saying that to say, man, I tell them all the times, and I'll put this back in the context of JSU's football team, that in our foundational example about the hands, like it is going to be that very small action that you consistently do where it becomes a lifestyle that differentiates you from being that great team or the best team and just being like a middle of the pack team. I tell them all the time, we have 12 teams in our conference. I break it down for them like this. Y'all, we're in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. We got 12 teams in this conference. On an average football roster, that is about 110 players. So you're telling me there are over 1,100 other players that have the same goal that you have, exact same goal. Like, so then you have to start asking yourself the question, like everybody is practicing, everybody in the weight room, everybody watching film, everybody has meal regimens and meal plans. So you got to take it a step further to figure out what are going to be those little minuscule goals and aspirations that you implore to make you that just a little bit better than the next man, to make sure that you're victorious at the end of the season than the other 1,100 players. Man, I think that's what it looks like for me. Just continuing to get them to assess what their habits and behaviors look like, and how can we make that one little behavior just a little bit better today. Don't even worry about if you ran a mile in if the goal is 6-minute mile and you ran at 8:30, let's not worry about getting to 8 right now. Let's get to 8:15 today. And then let's gradually over training count work our way down to 7:45. So yeah, man, that's kind of what it looks like in my context.
I knew that we were going to have a good conversation. I have never heard that visual comparison of when you have 1,100 players, give or take, a little bit more, a little bit less, that, to your point, have the same goals. They're all working out on a field, whether it's turf or grass. They're all lifting in the weight room. They're all studying film. They're all going to class at some point. They're all doing X, Y, Z, but it's what's going to differentiate the average from that one team that wins is not where, they have, great weight room and everybody else just has nothing. It's assuming that everything is relatively the same, which knowing your conference it is. It's all those little things. But going back to what you said, tendency, habits, behaviors, and lifestyle, I love that. I've never heard those four back to back to back to back, but the way you talk about it, it's so true. And the word that kept on coming to my mind as you were saying that is occasionally. And I use the example all the time. If I'm speaking to a large audience, I'll give the analogy saying, okay, I bet that every single person in this room could absolutely crush one workout, right? And everyone say nod their heads. And I said, okay, I bet every single person in this room could really eat clean for one day, right? And everyone, that nods their head and like, okay. But I said, it's not about what you do once. It's about that second day, that third day. All of a sudden, it's raining, it's snowing, it's too hot. And that's the difference between those 1,100, those 1,200 players that ultimately dwindle down to one championship team. Because as you know, whatever conference you're in, whatever league you're in, whether it's Division 1, 2, 3, or JUCO, there's only one champion at the end of the road.
Man, and that made me think about a quote that I tell the team, or I've told the team before, about being extraordinary. Like, to be great, you don't have to be extraordinary. You just have to do the ordinary extra. Like, so don't even worry about, like I said, the end goal. What is the ordinary? Like I said, what is that little small thing? Like you said, we're working out. What are those minor things? Form in working out. Are we prioritizing form? Because we understand that if we consistently lift the right way, then what does it do? That compounds, and it may curve the level of injuries that we have. So, like, just those little things, just prioritizing them, giving attention to them, and making sure just every day we're trying to be consciously aware of them and getting better at them.
I love that. So you touched on your book for a second. I have to ask if you could please tell our listeners a little bit about your book and where they can find it.
I did. I released a book last year in 2024, January 2024. It's actually a 21-day devotional. It's called Pray, Plan, Execute When Believers Level Up. Through this devotional, I'm trying to get believers to separate themselves from the mentality that faith only is what can propel us forward. Faith only is what can get us from one level to the next. When one of my favorite scriptures, James 2:26, is what says, "For the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also." So my thing through that book, man, it covers 4 F's: faith, family, finances, and fitness. And I think like these are the 4 areas that should be prioritized to develop good habits in that will lead to us reaching the pinnacle of our potential. Yeah, like I said, man, it's a 21-day devotional. They're broken up into like 5 devotionals for that 21 days. One revolves around faith, one revolves around family or community, one revolves around mental, spiritual, and emotional fitness, and one revolves around finances. And basically, the idea is to just read one a day. It has scriptural references to associate with that devotional. And then there are some prompts that ask questions at the end of it. So it's an engaging workbook as well.
I love that. And for me, I think it's so powerful when you can put something behind it, whether that's questions, whether it's reflection, whether that's exercises to do. And, I know a lot of people don't like those. And I have to say that, when I was reading books when I was younger, I was that checkbook guy where it was like that check mark, where I was like, okay, I read the book and then I get to chapter 7 in your book. I'm like, oh, come on. I'm like, I got to do these 3 questions. And I kind of flip through it. But then as I go back, and I have 2 huge libraries on both sides in my office here, I'll go back through, and there's just a bunch of stuff when I'm like, oh, it's really cool to go back and flip through and reread some of that stuff. So you can't answer this question with your book. So you got to just preface that way. But have you read anything recently, or are you currently reading something that you'd like to maybe recommend to our listeners?
I'm currently reading a book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I mean, she's a former, is it Google or Apple CEO or both? One of them. Basically, now this revolves around becoming a better, she refers to it as boss or supervisor. And she has like this quadrant where she has these 4 areas that I can't think off the top of my head, but that all managers, supervisors, bosses should be cognizant of as they manage teams. So I think that's the kind of the space that I'm in life right now, where I'm in a lot of different environments where I have to like manage groups of people. So I'm just trying to like read things that like best are the most befitting for that. So yeah, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And I just got back into physical books. I was doing audiobooks for a while, but I just got back into actually holding it in my hand.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think so many people do that as well. Different phases in their life where they're traveling a lot maybe, and they don't want to physically bring books, or in our world where maybe we're doing driving or to and from where we don't have as much of that time. So I think you can always take advantage. And going back to early part of our conversation with technology today, some people will say if you're not reading it, it's not reading it. But, there's obviously different ways to look at it. But I think at different times, kind of like the biblical perspective of different seasons in life, you kind of go through different things where you're like, hey, like I have a lot of downtime right now, so I can physically pick up books and do it. The famous Jim Rohn quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with." I know you've heard that quote. If I could grant you dinner tonight with any 5 people, dead or alive, that you could level up with, who would you pick for your 5?
Oh man, 5 to have dinner with tonight. Jay-Z, Simon Sinek, Gary Vaynerchuk, Eric Thomas,
E.T.
and Mark Cuban. I think those. Yeah, I think that was a solid 5.
Definitely a solid 5. I don't do this always. Throwing a curveball at you, you got to invite a female. Who do you invite?
Oh man, see, I could come up with five females, but
all right, no, all right, I'm putting you on the spot. Go ahead, 5 females. Let's go.
Oh, 5 females. Oh man. So I would invite. It's a lady by the name of Rua Benjamin. She's a professor at Harvard. Man, I love her scholarship, love her work. Rua Benjamin. I know a lot of people would would kind of probably scold me for this, but not because I'm necessarily a fan or not a fan, but I like some of her content. I want to probe her thinking a little bit more. Candace Owens. I'm just really intrigued by the way she thinks about certain things, and I have challenges for a few. Now I've always wanted to like sit across from her, but Hillary Clinton, Don Staley, and I'm thinking about a versatile bunch, and Michelle Obama.
I have to say it. I know I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it. You could just send Hillary Clinton an email. She'll probably respond. I had to. Sorry. I had to. That was too easy. Well, I'm gonna give you props. So I will say this. Not only did you answer 5, but then you confidently said, when I said to you, can you name a woman? You said, oh, I can do 5. And then I challenged you and you named 5. But I'm going to say this too. The best part about this question is, first of all, there's no right or wrong answer. But secondly, I can always tell when the way in which someone answers it, that they've actually thought about the way in which they'd like to have. And I'm glad you mentioned and prefaced Candace Owens not specifically agreeing or disagreeing, because that leads me to something that I wanted to ask you is, I feel we are in a place, forget the world, 'cause I'm not I can't speak outside of our country, but in our country where we no longer have conversations or debates for conversation reasons and education reasons. It's right or wrong. There's a black or white to an answer. There's no gray. It's like you love this person or you hate him. She's the best or she was the worst. And now I don't want to also preface it that, everybody should, everybody gets a trophy and but I really and truly believe that some of the best people, and I mean best people, not character-wise, but intelligent leaders, they're the ones that gain information from all different people. So if you're a diehard Republican, you read a couple books from phenomenal Democrats or independents, and it doesn't mean you need to switch sides from the fence. It doesn't mean that you and I have a conversation and at the end we say, okay, well, Jason won, Chris lost. But I have to ask, in your world, how have you been able to help kind of try to change some of the narrative where it's really good to have conversations and debates if you're open to listen, but also open to be heard?
Yes. So, man, great question. One, I really started when you asked that, it immediately took my mind to my classroom. So I started in my classroom. So I've been teaching on the higher ed level. I've taught at 3 different institutions for 4 years now, going on 5. And I stopped using textbooks. And that was why I started. The reason I stopped using textbooks was because I stopped believing in us, because I teach history. So ancient, modern world history, civil rights history, African American studies, things like that. And what I was finding is the reason I stopped using textbooks is because I felt like I was robbing students of the opportunity to engage various narratives by only restricting them to this one linear person's narrative and research interests about these topics in this textbook. So what I started doing is, if we are talking about, I just say the American Revolutionary War, I would start with the question from an kind of inductive standpoint, asking my students, was the American Revolutionary War really revolutionary? Now let's listen, let's look at what this scholar wrote about it. Let's look at what this scholar wrote about it, and let's compare and contrast their narratives and their perspective on the war, how they told the story. That's kind of something that I've been engaged in my classroom for the last 3 to 4 years, because I think engaging healthy perspectives is beneficial. Like, to see what multiple people have to say about the same thing. And this is what we see in politics all the time. Same issues, but you're hearing it from the perspective of different people or from different sides of the aisle. So I literally, in my classroom, try to train students, and I try to do it better, as best as I can, at not giving them my opinion in a way that steers the way they think about something. But I want to give you a healthy balance of one perspective, one narrative versus another perspective and narrative, one piece of scholarship versus another piece of scholarship. And I want you to draw your own conclusions about how you feel about it, based on not only the research and the education that you get, but even off your experience. So the way that I look at, for instance, I'm in Mississippi. They just passed a law in Mississippi where they are requiring homeless people, because we have a large homeless population. And if they squat in certain areas, they get a $50 fine. And there are some other stipulations where they're making it illegal for them to solicit for money on certain highways, things like that. Well, the justification from one side was, this is eliminating crime. Like, there's too much crime from homeless people. That is what the narrative that they're pushing as to why they push this law. Well, from my perspective, I came up in a low-income household. I know people who have been homeless. I have seen some of my classmates on the side of highways as I've been like driving or whatever. So my perspective is a whole lot different based on my experience. So that is what I try to employ my students to do. Okay, let's take the scholarship, the research, all these different narratives, and let's actually examine and engage them, assess them, evaluate them. But also, don't rob yourself of the beauty in your experience as well, that will inform the way you think about and view certain things. So I think short answer, that's, well, short kind of.
I first of all, I appreciate your perspective, and you said something that stood out is early on in your answer was to compare and contrast. And I think that is the foundation of what this country was based upon. But then you also shared that you come up with your own evaluation. And the fun part about these conversations, obviously, I've done research on my guests and I know kind of where, or which questions I think I'm going to ask. Obviously, I've asked a bunch of different ones because we've had a really good conversation. But I think the best part is that stood out to me about that answer when I go back to my formal education days, whether it's a textbook, whether it's a paper, whether it's a story, a time in our country, or what have you, that we're studying, depending on what we're studying, we are studying one perspective, one author, one book, whatever it is. And I think you'd agree, in no way am I saying that that's wrong, because obviously you talk about American Revolution, you can't give kids, 27 different books to read in one class and be like, okay, but the trade-off is the way we're taught is we are taught to learn a subject, a topic, to be able to take and pass a test or to be able to write a paper that is graded satisfactory. So we go through the system. And I think that's where education today, and we could probably go for about 10 hours on this. I don't want to in any way hint that our educational system is broken, but I think you brought up a phenomenal point is if you only have one perspective, and that's what you're taught, doesn't matter if you're young, old, male, female, if you're taught one book, one teacher, one topic, now maybe that's the world's leading expert on that topic, but the reality is you don't want to have obviously 10,000 different opinions because then you'll never know anything. But if you're only reading one thing or hearing one thing, that's what eventually in your mind becomes like fact. And I don't want it to be fact or fiction, but just because you say something doesn't mean I have to agree with everything you say.
Yeah, most definitely. And I try to do a really good job at like vetting the sources that I use. I always use peer review research in my courses. I always use things that have been published. Like we were taught in school, like I'm using things that come from the .org, the .edu, or .net. Nothing from Wikipedia or the .coms. Like, so I'm always making sure I do that. But man, you're absolutely right, man. I think it's so important for us to engage different perspectives that kind of inform and kind of shape our worldview. For me, like when I was growing up, like as I kind of went to college, continued to get my formal education, I couldn't dismiss what I was seeing through research, but also what I was experiencing. We talk about, a high crime, the high crime rates. Well, for me, I came up in a 2-parent home, and I firmly believe that is half the battle. If you have 2 parents in a home, that can provide so many benefits to your soft skills. But what I was seeing around me was, it was a crime. It was a lot of crime in my neighborhood coming up, but like the crime was being performed by people I went to school with, people I would consider good people. They were my friends. They were my associates. Like they were people that I used to play basketball with, never harmed me, but I also had insight into their experience. I knew that they only had their mom at home. I knew their mom was trying to work like 3 jobs. And I knew that sometimes I had friends whose parents would never come home. So when they had little siblings, they had to just figure it out. How am I going? I got to make sure my little brother and me are fed. So what would they do? The only thing that the streets has taught me to do, man, I got to go steal something from somebody for us to survive. So I can't dismiss my experience knowing the people that I know and knowing their why behind doing certain things, not justifying it or even supporting it or saying that they should. But it's like, I understand, like y'all had to eat. Now, as I'm engaging this different scholarship, I take that perspective, that experience into the way that I gauge certain scholarship. So when we're talking about a crime problem, I'm not only looking at it from a research standpoint, I'm looking at it from an experience standpoint. And that's kind of inform how I take actionable steps to be a part of the change that I want to see.
To take it one step further, I love going back to that compare and contrast perspective is putting actual ideas and thoughts behind specific instances. So if we were in the classroom, let's say we were talking about, crime or something like that, maybe we can engage the class with a conversation of, okay, knowing the situation, what are some potential solutions to do it, right? And it doesn't mean, and I really, what's that?
I said, you still in my curriculum? Do you got a hidden camera in my classes? This is exactly how it goes.
I do. I've actually, I wasn't supposed to tell you, but I've been recording your all your stuff. No, but that to me, it goes back to what you said before, where whether it's government, school, teachers, coaches, we have people that have positions of leadership, and I don't mean in any way that everything should be perfect, but we have people that sometimes make a decision across the board, and they don't take into consideration everybody that's involved. And it's impossible in big school systems and cities and rural areas where there's so many differences, because one size never fits all. I don't care how old you are, where you stand politically, religiously, athletic or not. There's not one size fits all, but it's taking it a step further and say, okay, well, before you say why Jason is wrong or he's bad, offer up a different solution or a potential solution. And I think if we did more of that, and not to get on the soapbox, but I think if we did more of that, starting with politics, I think our country would be in a much better place, because it's no longer Jason's on the other side of this political debate, so I hate him, he's bad, I'm right, he's wrong. It's, well, you know what? Let me try to understand your perspective. I might still completely stand where I stood before the conversation, but at the end of that conversation, somebody should be able to say to me, Chris, give me 20 seconds, explain Jason's perspective. And someone should be able to say to you, all right, Jason, explain Chris's perspective. And it doesn't mean you have to cross over that fence and say, okay, now I'm a Democrat or Republican, or now I'm faith-based or not. But it's first and foremost seeking to understand as opposed to seeking to be right. Right. Man, you just said a mouthful, brother. Because that's it. Even in my classroom discussions, when they get a little heated, I always try to, man, y'all have to respect everybody's, or you have to at least engage everybody's opinion. Even I know, like, respect may be, something that vary or becomes subjective with whatever your moral construct is. So I don't even say respect. I just say at least engage another perspective. At least be open to hear their end from what end of the spectrum they're coming from. So yeah, man, right there with you. You have to be open. That's the key part. So social media, we touched on a little bit. Wanted to ask you if maybe there are one or two people that you follow on social media that really put out uplifting and motivational stuff that maybe you'd like to introduce or potentially reintroduce to our listeners. The first one that comes to mind is I follow this guy named Ryan Leak. He is a traveling motivational speaker that does like Fortune 500 companies, man. I really love his content. He is faith-based as well. Of course, I follow a lot of pastors, but some of those people that I named in the beginning that I would have that dinner with or that lunch with, I love Simon Sinek's comment. I don't know if it's Sinek or Sinek. I've heard it both ways. But I love his content, man. The practicality that he kind of implores with his content, it makes people feel like it's obtainable. Like, I can do this. Instead of, I think with a lot of speakers, they make a lot of goals, either personally or professionally or whatever the goal orientation that you're ascribing it to. I think they make a lot of goals feel out of reach. I love the practicality in which he communicates. Like, you can do this with these steps. So those are two that I really like to listen to: Ryan Leak, Simon Sinek. And what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, follow you? Please share the best way, and also where they can go ahead and get a copy of your book. So for me, my social media tag is the same on all outlets: Instagram, Twitter, now X, TikTok, even Snapchat. I'm not on there much, but I have it because I have it. And I am Jason Gibson on all of those outlets. Jason Gibson on Facebook, Jason Gibson on LinkedIn. And you can get a copy of my book actually on the easiest way is probably Amazon. So if you just type in Pray, Plan, Execute Jason Gibson, it'll pop right up.
and you can get the book from Amazon today.
I love it. And last question we have for you, same question we ask everybody, is if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Oh man, parting words. My favorite quote right now, which is unknown, and it's making me be a whole lot more conscious about the decisions that I make. But it says, "You're born looking like your parents, but you die looking like your decisions." The average human being, adult human being, scientific fact, makes anywhere from 33 to 35,000 decisions per day. I think your decisions have the power to drive your actions drive your outcomes, and your outcomes are what create your future. So if I could leave everybody with anything, it would be make better decisions and be more conscious about the decisions that you are making, from the smallest ones to the largest ones, from what time I wake up in the morning to whether or not I purchase this house. Like, whatever those decisions are, actively try to really examine the decisions you make, because I think they ultimately have the power to drive your outcomes in your future. So decisions, man.
I love it. I can't thank you enough for being on here. For our listeners, definitely I would recommend following Jason's stuff. And if you want to grab a copy of his book, as he said, you can get it today on Amazon. Not tomorrow, but you got to get it today. And I hope that you and I can connect again soon. And thank you again for being on here today.
Oh, yeah, man. And I forgot one more social media profile, the No Quit Living profile. That's one I just recently followed, and I've been sifting through the content. So, look, if you want to be better, that's a good outlet that you can follow.
I will send you a check in the mail. But no, I appreciate you, my man. Thank you for being on here. We definitely have to do this again at some point.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to episode number 578. What Jason shared with his parting words really hit me. He said, when we are born, we look like our parents, but when we die, we look like our decisions. That stopped me in my tracks. It's powerful and true. My challenge to you today is very simple. What do your current decisions look like? Are they building the life, career, or impact you want, or are they quietly pulling you in the wrong direction? If you're on track, keep going. But if something's off, don't wait. Pivot, adjust, step back into alignment. Because it's not the big moves that usually change everything. It's the little ones done consistently over and over again that shape our future. Thank you for tuning in. And as you go out and crush your day, remember, believe, and live out our motto. We rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.